let me start with a question. Every cybersecurity practitioner out here, right? Decisions that we make, every decision that we make today, right, influences how threats are managed, whether it is identification, detection, or prevention, right? So, end of the day, what matters is how you operate a SOC and how the SOC can, cater to your incident response plans or your digital investigation plans. So today I'm going to talk to you about how and why you need to accelerate your SOC. We'll go through what, how, and why. So if you look at the cybersecurity landscape today, there are many things that are changing, right? Let's start with the IT landscape. They're more interconnected, the enterprises are very, very much interconnected today, right? So there are IoT devices, there are, mobile users. The users are not just within the enterprise today, they are all over and they are mobile as well. And yet we need to run the business with all this, in practice. There are more IT in the cloud today than on-premise, right? Things have moved out of your on-premise data centers. And we use hybrid infrastructure, we use IoT devices today, and it's also forming part of the IT ecosystem that we are trying to protect in the enterprises. When you look at the application landscape, right, there are modern applications that we see today. There are applications that are getting to be cloud native that requires different kind of protections. There are applications that has to run anywhere, right? It has to be built to run on clouds, on virtual machines, or on-premise, right? So that's a shift that we are seeing happening. And it will change constantly, because if you talk to a DevOps guy today, so they adopt CI/CD models, right? They do continuous development, and it's not the case of applications going through the stringent UAT lifecycle, UAT process, and then getting deployed. It's so dynamic today. And we're talking about things like microservices, which are being used where the application has to have security built in the design. It's not the way that we use infrastructure to protect. It has to be part of the application itself. So this is bringing a lot of business challenge, right? At one hand, we have threats evolving. On the other hand, we have business driving IT to adopt these changes so that the enterprise can grow with its business. So with all this, we see an excessive trust that we are putting in on the system than what it used to be in the past, right? What we used to have is corporate approved devices. We used to have perimeterized environments where the applications are zoned and kept inside a data center. And then we have DMZs and internal zones that we used to have in the past. But today it's all changing. And this is bringing a new attack surface, right? The attack surface is changing and it is widening further. And on the other side, if you look at the threat landscape, the attackers are innovating and they were evolving in their tactics. We hear about ransomware, crypto mining, things are getting tough when it comes to defending these attacks. If you look at one of the research, one of the attack campaigns that the research has done today about Emotet, right? This is one of the widely distributed banking Trojan that has come into light, and it is in existence for more than 4 years now. What we are seeing in this particular campaign is creators of Emotet is collaborating with other malware creators, right? And just so that Emotet is into the cyber world and it has infected many endpoints out there, Emotet creators have started selling this particular footprint to other malware creators like Ryuk. We have seen instances of Emotet being used as a dropper to enter into IT environments. What started as a banking Trojan today is used as a dropper. And predominantly, if you see, it's email that is used, right? The email mal spam that we call about that gets delivered to an organization helps the attackers, infiltrate into into organizations worldwide. And if it's not the emails, it's phishing campaigns, right? It could be a malicious attachment or the email itself having links to phishing domains. And this particular campaign has seen to be persistent. To give an example of how the attackers are evolving, we've seen situations of mal spam trying to see if the environment it is using to spam beyond that point is actually blacklisted in spam odds and things like that. So it is actually getting innovative in terms of spreading its presence in the organizations. Beyond which, it is also trying to capture passwords, capture information in the endpoints it is sitting in, and it is talking to command and control. So the important thing that I wanted to bring to your notice here is the attackers are evolving their strategy. The very reason that you see attack campaigns having continuous communication with command and control is not just to get a command and start executing. They're also changing their tactics. They're also trying to change their tactics as and when they see the defense coming out in picture. So this is what has happened to Emotet as a campaign. So if you see, to sum it up all in the threat landscape side, email is the most prevalent threat vector that we see in the industry. IoT is actually extending the attack surface, and with cloud, it is becoming even more easier for the attackers to get in. And the threats are getting polymorphic. Defenses that tends to look at hashes, tends to look at IOCs, are sometimes not good enough when you see threats that are polymorphic in nature. Now let's see what's happening on the defender side, right? The security operations centers. Number one, we see a tremendous staff challenge there, right? Other sessions we did go through this particular point in elaboration. So there is a huge talent shortage, and the number of threats, the number of alerts that are coming up in these SOCs are some things that the SOC staff are not able to handle. One of the metrics that you can see on the slide right now is based on security research reports that Cisco has brought up with. 1 in 10 legitimate incidents are not being attended to, right? That's what the study really shows. These are legitimate incidents that requires investigation, but it's not being attended to. That's the situation on the SOC side. And the critical factor for any SecOps personnel to look at is the time that you're allowing the adversary to be part of your environment, right? The quicker that you detect and the quicker that you eliminate the adversary from the infrastructure, the better that you are. So gone are those days where you defend an attack and you try to eliminate them. We have come to a point where the attacks can perpetrate into any environment, but there has to be solutions in place which can detect things faster. So now let's look at what a next-gen SOC is, right? So that's what's happening on the ground. If you look at some of the, what Gartner has said, by 2022, 50% of all SOCs will transform into a modern SOC. When we say modern SOC, it should have integrated incident response. It should have threat hunting practices, threat intelligence built into the overall framework. So just a primer on what a SOC is all about. As a SOC, we have seen many organizations starting with administrative functions like firewall policy management, or could be, antivirus management, vulnerability system management. But the real SOC is the one that focuses on incident response or incident handling, right? In most cases, we have resources that are managing incident response, security administration focusing on incident response. So we have very limited, in those environments, there's very limited focus on handling incidents, whereas most of the time goes behind managing and administering systems. So there has to be a focused system and focused team in place to do incident management. When it comes to tools, most SOCs focus on using SIEMs, right? The SIEM systems collect logs from different data sources. It could be endpoints, it could be servers, applications, and they correlate them and come up with threats, right? Come up with observations that has to be investigated by security analysts. And if you look at it closely, most of the rules to detect these threats were human written, right? One has to actually find a logic to eliminate a threat from the noise that is happening in any environment. So those logics are written as correlation rules into SIM. And as we evolved, there is threat intelligence that came in, and threat intelligence was also used to cross-correlate. What is happening in an environment was actually cross-correlated with what's happening globally outside, so that we can see a threat before it hits us, before it comes in and shows up in your environment. But the focus here is you write the rules and you use threat intel to compare. Beyond this, the SOCs used to have log management solutions, right? What we want to log and what we want to store for a forensic analysis at a later point in time is also collected in a system and stored for 12, 24, 36 months based on the compliance needs that we have. So those are the two core areas that we used to have. But with this system in place, we have seen many situations where the incidents come up. We've seen situations of breaches. We've seen situations where a threat is not detected. This has happened to companies who had all the budget, all the money to invest and build these systems bulletproof. Now, what's going wrong? Let's look at the attacks in 4 quadrants. If you take any incident, you can fit the attacks and by attack vector into one of these 4 quadrants. So you have known threat actors and known attacks, and unknown threat actors and unknown attacks. The critical one is the unknown unknowns, right? When you have a known threat actor, you have the traces of the threat actor acting somewhere else. So the threat feed actually tells you that, hey, this threat actor is supposed to be using CNC servers of these domain lists, could be using these kind of IPs, these kind of tactics. So you know how the threat actor is going to, handle the attack. So you have the threat intel to tell you that. When you know the attacks, you can write the rules to say this is how the attack is going to happen. I will build a logic in such a way that the logic triggers an alert when it catches an attack of this type. But when it comes to unknown unknowns, right? You don't know the attackers. You don't know the type of attack that is going to happen. These are the 0 days. These are the advanced attacks that we normally see out there in the industry that's getting prevalent these days. So how do you handle these kind of attacks? So there are many ways we can handle unknown unknowns. So today, the important thing that has happened in the industry is the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence-based algorithms when it comes to threat detection. There's humongous data that is out there that you generate, whether you look at an enterprise with 1,000 employees or, or even less. There's a lot of transaction that happens between the applications and the end users. So if you were to build a system that can scan through all these logs and find out threats, with human written roles, it's not going to be possible. So with these capabilities of ML, number one, we're able to model what a threat is, and then use models to detect how detect the threats. Number two, we're also able to use behavioral algorithms to actually say that, okay, the endpoint that is talking on this particular node is actually a printer. It's actually an IP camera. You don't rely on a database of static Excel sheets that tells you that this IP belongs to this IP address. So that was information that you get when you actually configure the systems, but things are so dynamic these days, right? You may have a DHCP system allocating the same IP address to a different endpoint. So we need to use software intelligence to actually see what device is sitting on a particular port, or what device is actually talking on the network. So behavioral modeling helps to identify devices. It helps, machine learning helps us to take billions of data, telemetry data, and come out with observations that is related to a threat. Beyond all this, we need to have threat hunting. So why are we talking about ML today in cybersecurity? It has become very much affordable today with the cloud and the compute infrastructure that is available today. And number two, it helps us to eliminate from a humongous database, it helps us to eliminate and come up with that 1% of information that is relevant for us to do investigation. That's the key thing, which is something that you cannot just follow a SIM-driven, rule-based logic. So this is one of the examples of what an ML can do for a network analysis pipeline, right? So when we deploy security solutions, we either push it as a piece of software to the endpoints or servers, or it sits in between, in a transaction and screens all the transactions for good and bad. But there are other ways of implementing security as well, right? You can have a security solution deployed in a passive mode, where you pull all the transactions in a passive way out of the environment and push it to an analytics platform for us to generate threats, alerts. So this is an example of a system which is actually seeing 24+ billion requests per day, and you're able to get that 1% that we are talking about as anomalies out of these transactions. So this is what a software intelligence can do to detect threats in any SOC. This is another example. So you have 3 or 4 models that is classifying the data that you have, and then coming out with observations, and you have aggregated score to highlight which are those transactions that fall under the anomalous bucket as compared to the others. The unknowns are the ones that has to go to a analyst pipeline for them to start investigation on. Now let's talk about threat hunting, right? So in most SOCs, we have incident response processes, right? The incident response process follows a model where you have alerts that come up on the screen, and then you have a workflow to trigger based on what you see as alert. The workflow could be that you have a remediation process to mitigate because you know the kind of alert that you're seeing, or it could be that you have to put a set of analysts for further investigations. So threat hunting is beyond all this, right? Let's take a situation where there is an outbreak in the industry, right? For example, WannaCry or NotPetya, and the CISO of that organization is asked, hey, there is an event in the industry, there is a campaign that broke out. Are we infected by it? Is this organization actually infected by it, right? So those are the situations where you get down and to start doing threat hunting. There are a lot of research data out there that tells us how this particular campaign, whether you take WannaCry or NotPetya or VPN filter, there are many such campaigns that happen. And those research data tells us what are the IOCs, what are those information to look for in an environment to actually see was there a trace of this particular threat campaign in my IT environment, right? So those are the situations when you start threat hunting. That's one example. The other examples are like, I want to know that in my environment, there's too much of PowerShell activity that's happening, right? PowerShell is something that is used for good. A lot of DevOps team would be using it. At the same time, it is used for a lot of threat campaigns, right? It's also part of the process that you saw on Emotet as well. So what does threat hunting do for you? It actually strengthens the security posture of an organization, right? Because you're going beyond what your systems are telling you, what your tools are telling you, right? And it kind of acts like a red team exercise continuously built into your incident response and security operations center processes. So in the process of threat hunting, there are many ways you can stop or put defenses for your environment. This is what you see here is the pyramid of pain, right? The higher that you are, the better that you defend against the threat actor. So the threat actors don't like if you could actually build a defense that deals with the tactics and procedures they use to get in, to run a campaign. Right? That's when it hurts them. That's the point where they will have to actually give up, right? So that's the top of the the pyramid of pain. So in the threat hunting process, you create a hypothesis, right? Because there's no threat that exists. There are situations where there is no threat that exists. You create a hypothesis and try to come up with your observations that proves you sometimes wrong, sometimes you may get at bettering your security defense, security posture. The 5 W's, why should you threat hunt? It actually, it's a feedback loop for your incident response, for your security posture itself. The more you apply the threat hunting process, the better you get at identifying weaknesses in your environment and defending against threats. And most of the tools that you use in the threat hunting process is predominantly used in the breach situation, right? It actually helps your security operations team to get used to using those tools, right? That's another reason why you should be doing. Who should be doing it? It should be, in a way, implemented as part of your SOC processes to improve your SOC and at the same time to improve your defenses. When to hunt? The best thing that you can do is to have threat hunting with dedicated resources who can run this on a day-to-day basis where you always get better at defense. Visibility is a key thing for hunting, right? If you can't see a portion of a network, there are many organizations who take this transformation to cloud, transformation to cloud in form of using SaaS, email on Office 365, or SAP on cloud, or there are cases where the applications are moved to Amazon, Azure, or Google, right? The SecOps team, in most cases, does not have visibility to these environments, right? So they tend to stay with their traditional security solutions. They tend to stay with their firewalls and email security solutions and whatnot. So there is a good amount of security solution that you can apply on cloud. You can apply on SaaS environments as well, right? So if you're not actually building it for defense, it's at least better that you start with visibility out there. Unless you have the visibility, it's hard to start defending. That's so. If to sum it all up, you know, a next-gen SOC has to have capabilities that relates to using technology tools that goes beyond, you know, human written rules. Tools that employs AI and ML for threat detection, behavioral modeling, entity modeling, tools that helps you do threat hunting, right? Threat hunting can be done without tools as well, but time is of essence, right? In most cases, you're trying to compare what you know from the global threat intel to what you have in your environment. If you're looking for threats and if you're not covering, say, cloud, if you're not covering, say, email, you know, you're actually missing a backdoor out there, which may be a critical attack vector. So I'd like to summarize with how you can actually run a next-gen SOC. This here kind of gives you an idea of what you should be looking at. So in terms of visibility that I talked about, it has to cut across the entire organization footprint, be it endpoints, data activity, user identities, threat intel, configuration information, vulnerability information, right? In most cases, we know vulnerability management is a process that is run within an InfoSec organization. And it is run periodically to generate a report and tell an administrator that, hey, these are the vulnerabilities that I found, start patching them, right? So today, you know, that may not be the case that will work in today's threat landscape, right? We need to be knowing vulnerabilities of systems live online, right? As we see a threat, as we see an alert, targeting, let's say, matching a signature, matching a threat campaign, we need to be able to actually correlate that data live with that particular server and compare and say that, okay, this vulnerability actually exists and I have a connection trying to come into my environment to that particular server. So this is a confirmed act of exploit, right? So I'm going to treat these particular transactions differently in the SOC. I can probably have an impact counter on that and say this particular event that I found has more impact than the 1,000 other events that I see because the vulnerability data I have live tells me that there's an exploit possible. So what are those 5 capabilities to look at, right? Expand the threat visibility. When I say threat visibility, covering all the attack surface. An organization today may have email, web transactions, things on cloud, things on SaaS environment, IoT, right? So have visibility, if not for defense, across all attack surface, right? Any attack surface that you miss to cover, it becomes a weakness for anyone who is targeting your environment for attacks. Detect the unknowns, right? This is where we use software intelligence. It is good to write rules. It is good to build correlation rules, but today's threat landscape, with the threat landscape today, it's beyond our control. So use tools that will help us to detect those threats. Defense with intel, right? So when we say intel, the traditional model is to apply the intel after you collect the logs into a event management system. There are ways and means by which the intel can be applied on your defense systems. When I say defense systems, take for example that there's a web server that is running and there is a communication coming into the web server. Any web server today will have HTTP and HTTPS service. That's the web service that will open to the entire world. there will be communications that is coming from sources which are malicious, right? A typical firewall will still allow that because it has no intel to see if those sources are malicious, right? It's still a layer 4 TCP packet inspection firewall. So with new age systems, you can actually apply the threat intel to stop that particular communication, even though it looks legitimate. Another example, we have so much happening in our environment, and all the transactions that goes out to the internet has to happen through a domain name or a URL, right? Every domain name has to be resolved by a domain name server. Now, every domain name server out there resolves every domain name. It could be a malware domain as well. It could be a crypto mining domain. It could be a command and control domain. What if you apply a filter, a defense there on top of the DNS to say that, hey, these are the bad domains. Do not resolve these domains, right? There are ways to defend them. So DNS is something that we have, the SecOps teams have world over has not used as a threat telemetry, and that's one of the good areas to apply defense. Reduced data sets, again, use systems that allows you to take thousands of telemetry data into observations and alerts, and build automation to your incident response process, right? There are ways by which you can also automate threat hunting workflows that involves hunting and then giving you observations. There are a lot of ways you can do that using APIs to interface with the systems. So when we say gain visibility, it's network-wide, right? It is across the attack surface, and it should also be allowed, we should also have access to transactions that are encrypted. There are many transactions today that goes over the internet that are encrypted. And it's growing in size, right? Today we have 80% of the transactions on the internet, or more than 60% that is going on HTTPS. So we should have ability to look at encrypted data as well. And then look at internet-wide visibility. To give you an example, I may have a bad domain talking to my endpoints, talking to my IoT devices, but the threat intel may tell you that it is bad, but it's not, in the scale of 1 to 10, it's not as bad as, maybe 10, right? It's bad as 3 scores or 5 score. Now, if I want to further investigate and see, hey, why am I connecting to a bad domain, though it stands in with a score of 5? There are ways and means by which we can pull passive DNS information to investigate further to see what are the other domains that is hosting this IP address is hosting worldwide. Right? This is the intel data that can be leveraged by incident responders and threat hunters to further extend their investigation into any incident that you see. And reduce the noise that you have in the environment, right? So there are, if we are looking at telemetry, right? When we say visibility across the attack surface, there's a lot of telemetry out there, right? When you use systems that allows you to, do behavioral modeling and anomaly detection, it kind of reduces billions of transactions into thousands or hundreds of alerts. So you can jump into those alerts immediately and start investigating. And automation so there are many SOCs out there, and there are many ways you have deployed the SOCs. And the common methodology is consuming the logs from different data sources and analyzing with the SIEMs, right? In order to take the journey to next-gen SOC, the implementers can look at adding telemetry from different data sources that I talked about. It could be to start with DNS as a telemetry source, or maybe doing workloads as telemetry source, beyond application logs, beyond system logs, or getting into having more visibility to endpoints in terms of processes, endpoints in terms of file activity, endpoints in terms of network activity. So that kind of tells you that you're not just doing point-in-time detection of alerts, you're having continuous visibility on what happens in these environments. So that's a way that we can adopt a next-gen SOC capability. Start with adding more telemetry to your SOC program so that you get more visibility and get to detect threats faster. So in order to sum it up, SIM is a good start for SOC, but that's not all. There are many other capabilities the SOC has to have, and it's important for any practitioner out there to defend against attacks in today's threat landscape. Next-gen capabilities are very important if the SOC has to stay relevant and be updated on detecting threats. There is many ways you can reduce the investigation time and response time by using automation, whether it is APIs that you can use to automate or use tools that consume APIs from different platforms. Pull telemetry information back into a console and tells you that, hey, this is what is happening in your environment in a click of a button. So there are tools out there to adopt there. And when you find a model, when you find a workflow that tells you that these are the incident response processes where I will certainly apply a remediation process, and these are the 5 steps I will apply, you can go ahead and automate them as well. For example, if you are seeing a machine that is executed malware, right? Executed malware, and this is what information that you get from your endpoint security system. You can isolate the machine by automating the whole process. By sending an API call, whether to an endpoint security solution or a network access control solution, to say that, hey, quarantine the system. So you cut down the entire incident response cycle to minutes, instead of you having an agent or a SOC analyst coming in and doing the whole process. So that's my concluding slide. Thank you very much.
So I'm TT. I work for UDC. So the product that we are going to talk about today is focused on the dark web. Okay, but just a few words about the company. Okay, UDC. So what I have here is the collections of headlines, right? They are global headlines. This is just a small selection, right? You can see in August 2019, there's a reported Iran state attack, okay, hacking attack on Bahrain. Essentially, it's a cyber attack launched by a country against another country. And July 2018, that was a very big, Singapore, very famous. It's an incident that actually started a community of inquiry, okay, for about a year. So it's a state-sponsored, okay, attack on SingHealth, which is the largest Singapore health organizations. Okay, they stole a lot of medical records, and one very peculiar thing is that there was a lot of focus on the Prime Minister of Singapore health record. And you also see there's a headline on, last year there was a Cambodia elections, and it was reported that, there are Chinese state-linked hackers. They are interfering in the Cambodia elections. And this is probably not news because you know that even in American elections, which is, essentially the country with the, let's say, the strongest cyber defense, their elections are being interfered to. And you have increasingly state-sponsored attacks on banks, okay? And it's on the rise, okay? Just July 2019, a hacker stole 100 million credit card records from Capital One. And it was later found out that it was just the work of a single hacker. Okay, so increasingly, I think organizations, financial institutions, banks, and even just large enterprises, you're not just being prone to attack, by sophisticated organized crimes, or hacker organizations. They are small, I would call them the SMEs of hackers, okay? You know, they have capabilities and they're launching attacks, you know, to steal your data because data is a gold mine now. And in April 2019, there was a survey, okay, on many large enterprises and government agencies in Singapore on cyber attacks. And the report was, on average, in 2018, each organization was attacked at least 4 times. So if the questions, and I think there are a lot of CIOs and CISOs here in the forums, if the questions you have on your mind is my organization prone to be attacked? The answer is a definite yes. So if you haven't detected it, chances are, you know, somebody is stealing your data without your knowledge. So essentially, as a consultancy company, we help collect data, okay, for our clients. We help them to analyze, because increasingly the amount of data you need to analyze, okay, is humongous. Okay, you need algorithms, okay, AI algorithms, to sieve out what is the critical information, so you can take actionable actions. Okay, so in terms of coverage, as a consultancy, we look at across the network. You have obviously your internet, mobile network, Wi-Fi networks to collect information, and we also have defensive solutions that covers IT and critical infrastructures, okay? Protecting all your critical assets, your airports, your ports, okay? Your water facilities and hospitals. And obviously now, I think throughout today, you heard from a lot of speakers, one of the weak links is the end users and the end device. And that's becoming the source of information where hackers are targeting. Because most of the information, whether it's enterprise information, okay, whether it's a person information, they're all held in a single device. Never in, I think, the history of human, where we have so much information, okay, that is all concentrated in one single device. All our communication records, all our probably passwords, okay, banking records, all on a single device. And obviously we have solutions that covers also national security operation centers, okay, command centers. So in terms of coverage, the service that we provide is very wide. We have 4 global HQ. Udi, my MD, actually showed this slide earlier. So he was focusing a little bit more on the tip of the iceberg, essentially the open internet, which is the open source intelligence. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on, you know, the dark web part. So the tools that we use is a tools that's carried by this company called Kela. It's a specialized organizations that is actually started by a group of ex-Israelis, army intelligence personnel. Their focus is just dark web-based intelligence. Okay, the company is about 100 plus people, okay, in terms of employee. Why do we talk about the employee size? Because half of the employees are actually pure analysts, people who are analyzing the data, collecting the data from the dark web. So you have a group of analysts, 50, 60 people, whose job every day is to get involved with the dark web, to curate, to collect information, and then process it, and then pump it out to the various organizations that are subscribing to their service. The people who subscribe to their service include government agencies, okay, law enforcement, and also, in Asia Pacific, for example, 50% of our businesses are with banks, financial institutions, and enterprises. So primarily, I think right now, in terms of the split, okay, the key financial institutions are, those in the more developed markets in Asia Pacific, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Japan. But increasingly, we are hearing a lot of inquiries also from developing market, okay, from Indonesia. So people are looking at it because it is a universal problem. It doesn't matter you are a small bank, for example, okay, you might say, hey, I'm a small financial institution in Sri Lanka. My business is primarily only in Sri Lanka. People are not interested. People are more interested in the big targets. So the question I would pose to you is that if you look at the psychology of a thief, if you are a thief, you are trying to steal from somebody in the neighborhood. You see, 10 big houses. You know that, these people are loaded. There are a lot of riches in those houses, okay? And you see a small middle-income family house, okay? If those 10 rich big houses, the doors and windows are all locked. And this middle-income house, the door is open, and you look at it, there's nobody inside. Who would you go for? Just like a hacker, okay, on the internet, they look for the weakest link, the easiest target. Okay, they steal what they can. So, going further, why the darknet, you might ask? The darknet, there are people, there are players who are in there. There are different actors, okay? And these actors are mostly the terrorists, the criminals, okay, the drug dealers, okay, and a lot of hackers. So they go there because their identity is concealed, okay? You can, have a persona, and nobody knows what you are doing. You go there for information, you go there to sell, and you go there to trade. So why do you need to then get involved in dark web? Because this is where the activities are, okay? Where people start to come up with a plan. For example, if a hacker wants to steal your data, okay? There's a saying, no man's in an island, okay? If you want to operate alone, you don't have information, you go to the dark web, you ask for information, you ask for help. If you are a terrorist, okay, you are lone wolf terrorists, okay? You can, find, you can find information on how to make a bomb, but if, for example, you want to find a blueprint of a target, where do you go for? You go to the dark web, you ask people, okay, can you find me a blueprint of an airport, for example? Or you ask for help, okay, on the dark web, because they know this is where their counterparts are active. But what is the challenges of, getting information from the dark web? Because obviously we all know that to get into the dark web, you need a specialized, Tor browser, okay, to get into the dark web. If you're new to it, how do you get into, okay? It's not easy to get into, but it's hard to, it's not difficult to get into, but it's very hard to establish yourself, because reputation matters in the dark web. If you're new, you have no reputation, nobody is going to trust you, because they're not sure whether you are, you're an investigator or you are from the police, okay, trying to find out information. So it's hard to extract information. So what the service is essentially, okay, in terms of the dark web tools that we are talking about, it is a tool set, okay, that is doing extreme targeting. Extreme targeting, that means that, for people who are subscribing to the service, for example, if you're a bank, okay, here, they're subscribing to the service, you will see data that are only relevant to you, so that you can cut out all the other noises, okay? And you have curated sources. There's a group of 50, 60 analysts whose everyday job is to go into the dark web to look up new websites, because a lot of the sites in the dark web are transient. They appear now, 2 months later, they are gone. And they are no longer, inexistent, okay, anywhere. But what happens is that in the tool, okay, every information is harvested and they are kept in an offline databases that you can access anytime. So all transient informations that are gone in the dark web will still exist in our databases. And it's a complete automated system. You do not need to do anything, okay? The tools automatically harvest sites based on a pre-programmed, pre-curated sources, okay? And then based on the search criteria and relevance, okay, that your organization has defined, the tools automatically find out the relevant information for you and then pump it to you. So Radar is the name of the tool, okay? It's an automated technology scanning a curated set of the dark and deep web sources. So the key features essentially is fully automatic, okay? Collections and analysis of intelligence. There's research and analysis behind it. If you, for example, okay, found a critical, let's say, issue that you want to investigate further, you can actually call for a customized analyst to provide support to do a customized focused, in-depth analysis in the topic for you, which for enterprises and financial institutions, which is a very good thing because, sometimes you find something, for example, you notice that, your credit cards, are being sold on the internet, okay, on the dark web. So you can get the analyst to do an in-depth report to you so that you know how to react to it, okay? Do you go and purchase this data from this guy? How do you know that the data that this guy is trying to sell is real? Okay, the analyst can help you perform some of this action if you want an in-depth analysis. And of course, it comes with recommendations, okay, on actions that you can take so that you know what to do. So this is my last slide. So it is a fully automated system and undetectable monitoring. Undetectable monitoring, which is very important because for a security agency, for example, if you do dark web searching, and let's say, the owner of the dark web decide that, hey, this guy has a search pattern that looks very unusual. It looks like you're trying to harvest information. So what happens is that they could potentially take a few actions. Trace who you are, okay, and try to identify you, which if you are a security agency, you do not want that to happen, okay? Or they could, in some dark web sites, when they detect hostile, okay, browsing, they actually launch an attack against your source IP. So what happens in the tool is that in Radak, everything, okay, is automatically pulled from the source and harvested and is kept in an offline databases. So everything that you access is an offline database. So you are undetectable. Second is multiple language support, okay? So out of the 50, 60 analysts, combined, they speak about 30 different languages natively. So they don't need to depend on Google Translate, okay, to translate anything. Okay, there are people who speak Spanish, Arabic, obviously English, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans. So there are 30 native language speakers, okay, on those teams that help you to interpret the information on the dark web. And obviously they have their custom-built, Tor and I2P, tools to help you automatically extract those informations. And they give you notifications. So as a user of the system, you get notified what is the hottest topic, what is the newest information. And you get it refreshed, obviously, on the daily basis. So for now, I'm going to just jump into a little bit of a demo, okay? So I hope everybody can see this screen. So this is a demo site that we use, okay, on Radak. So the data you see here are true, but some of the names has been changed to conceal the identity of the organizations that the data was harvested for. So if you look at the Radak, right, so what happens is that the screen is fully customizable. It's categorized into big groups like, hacking discussions, leak credentials, network vulnerabilities. You can customize like who you are, the key targets that you want to protect. For example, if you are organizations, okay, that you are very concerned if there's anybody who wants to launch an attack against your CEO or or the chief of your organization's email account, you can put them as targets to protect. And then the system automatically searches if there are mentions of them, okay, whether it is their name, some form of their email address, or some credential. So they will automatically search for it. You have here below all the alerts in different colors. Okay, some of the, obviously those are in red are key alerts. For example, if you click on this one, you see this is a dark web source that are trying to sell network access capabilities. This was, like say, done for a particular organizations, and those highlighted in red are the key search criteria that we're looking for. But coincidentally, in this particular seller, there was a army.lanka that they were trying to sell, okay, for 25,000. Okay. On the bright side of this, if you look at it, among everything that was on sale for network access, army.lanka fetches the highest price. Okay, so data from Sri Lanka are highly priced. Okay, The other thing that are often being used are network access, okay, vulnerabilities. So I wanted to just make one statement on what we do, right, in terms of network access. So this is our visual reconnaissance. So you can take a look at, for example, the domain. Okay, you just need to follow the spots and find out your open ports. So these are the open ports of the organization that we are looking into. So what I wanted to distinguish between what we do and what, let's say, for example, you can engage, white hacker to do, penetration testing, or you can engage company that do automated penetration testing of your organizations. So this is a little bit different from those functions. So those functions, you actually do testing. You do a probe, okay, against each port to see where the vulnerability is. So what is pictured here, you see, is actually accumulations of information from the dark web sources, and it's pieced together. So why is it important? Because if you're a hacker, okay, when you want to start researching, okay, on attack on organizations, the dark web is the first place that you go to. So as organizations that are trying to defend against a hacker, you need to know the plan of the hackers. These are the places, or these are the information that the hacker have access to. So everything that you've seen here exists in the dark web because some hackers, found out about this and they are sharing it. All right? So, for example, you see open ports. So it is very clear, if you have an open port, you're just inviting for trouble. Of course, hacker who hacks your network, it's still a crime. But if you have an open port and you're not doing anything about it, you are literally just inviting for trouble. Okay? So that's what I want to show. Okay, it's a bit of a short demo. Okay, if there's any interest, we can talk about it in greater details. But I want to just show you a flavors of what are the capabilities. Oh yeah, sorry. Before I wrap up. Okay, I wanted to show one more thing. The other data that's obviously very critical to financial organizations is credit card. So there's also a category within the dark web tools, okay, Radar, that shows all the credit cards that are on sale. So for different organizations who subscribe to a service, you will see different information based on what you're interested in. For example, if you are a particular bank, okay, we will use your bank identification numbers to identify, credit cards that you issue as a bank, okay, that are being sold on the dark web. And with that, you can, do your own analysis. What do you want to do? Do you want to inform all these customers, okay, their card might have been compromised and do a reissue, or you want to buy this information off the dark web? And everything you see on the tools are downloadable. You can download as report. For example, this thing that I downloaded is an Excel file of the network credentials, okay, that are on the dark web from the tool, from the Radar tool. Some of them are in the clear, as you can see here. Some of the passwords are in the clear, and some of them are encrypted. But there are ways that you can unencrypt and review the real password behind it. Or you can, like I mentioned earlier, request for incidents report, okay, from one of the analysts to do more in-depth study. If you know that, for example, your organization has been targeted in the dark web, all right, then you will get a detailed report on the incidents that that you are interested in, okay, by the analyst. With that, I will end my presentations, okay?
So the final panel, and thank you very much for your patience. So let's, I think, the show by 5:30 we'll finish this. So first of all, I must render an apology for Lal Dash. The designation is quite wrong there, so it should be Chief Executive Officer. Lal, I'm really sorry about it. So I think to start with, I would like the panelists to give 2 minutes on your perspectives of the two speakers who mentioned about the digital forensic dynamics and your perspective of that. So can I start with Indigo? Yeah. Just 2 minutes.
Okay. Both the speakers spoke about the tools, what is available. So I'll give you a bit of a flavor on the Sri Lankan context, what we have on that. So tools like, which is in the dark web, he spoke about the credit card is being sold or data is being extracted, and also where the your hospital data or the medical records is getting tapped in, right? So as a nation where the ICT agency where I'm attached to, we have all this data which is in our custody. Now, as example, we have health records about 4 million people, which is in the government cloud. So that's a fairly large amount of data which is being stored. Or we say a lot of people use credit card for get your revenue license online, or rather you pay your property taxes online, so which is the data is getting stored with us. Or even go to a very entry level of your educational content, kids are getting into the cloud, which is millions of them getting in. So looking at all the things what is happening around the world, which is starting from the blue chip corporates to the national security, looking at that angle, it's very critical that we have all this measurements which is implemented in any part of the world. So probably Lal may also elaborate on the extent of, from a government point of view, where the Sri Lanka CERT come into action. So one specific case I will take specifically on the education sector, which is again, which is that a lot of data is getting stored and also getting used, which is we have created the education cert, which is specific to the education sector, which is we will do the downstream training, what we need to do, and how the protection of that data will be done.
Going through these digital forensic investigations, what I could conclude is that there are two types of organizations. One of the organizations is who knows that they have been hacked. The other organization is that they are not aware that they are being hacked. From a perspective of Sri Lanka, is that since 2015 we have been monitoring digital forensic investigations. Initially in 2015 we saw there was a lot of cheating via cyber. Then the second most was cyberbullying. Then the third most attacks were on sexual harassment. But over a period of time, in 2019, it's cyberbullying is the highest number of complaints we have. Cheating has gone down. Sexual harassment complaints have come down. But we see increase in hacking. So that shows the Sri Lankan populace is quite cyber literate, and they are taking cybersecurity quite seriously. And so I think more to be done in terms of cybersecurity and cyber literacy where organizations and especially where government agencies are concerned. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to concentrate on what Ashraf had to say, because I think it's very important in terms of government infrastructure, critical infrastructure in this country. It's very relevant because he was talking about security operation centers. Today, most security operating centers or SOCs, they try to analyze millions and millions of logs, and really it ends up being a huge waste of time. So what Ashraf was talking about was looking at very focused, taking only the malware and analyzing that malware without actually going into the logs, into large-scale, analyzing large-scale logs. So I think that's very relevant in today's context, because the amount of time that analysts waste in the typical traditional SOC has to be reduced at some point or the other. So thank you for that, Ashraf, for pointing that out. I think a lot of the SIEMs as well are not actually serving its purpose. People are spending a lot of money on those installations, on this infrastructure, but not actually achieving that. On the dark web, yes, I mean it's a big issue. The dark web actors are a bane for this society, and I think it's a growing profession, if you may call it a profession, and it's something that needs to be addressed as we go along.
Government is going on a digitizing drive. So we know all our information. I think the driving license is digitized. We are looking at the national identity card is also coming on board. So probably we are heading towards a place where one number can tell you everything of yours. So the security plays a major role in that, I would say. So in terms of the government digitizing process, if you rate from a scale from 1 being the lowest and 10 the highest, where would place the security in terms of the digitizing process at which level?
Yeah, so as you said, the one number is more or less is a reality getting into now, which is what you call the SLIN number, Sri Lanka Identity Number. So all your health records, all your numbers, or like, what your the information will get synced into it. But if you look at it, even Jayant spoke before the panel, which is the Data Protection Act is coming in. So we have the regulatory framework is getting filled in alongside with the digitization which is happening. So that's, we are not isolated, the digitization will happen and the rest of the things will come, but in parallel, both the work is happening. So are we really in par with the rest of the world or a mature market or emerging market? I think not, we are not far behind. So I can call it with like, Sri Lanka cert is being set up like a few years or long years ago on mind in that, which is we are going downstream. And also, I think Sri Lanka Police has their system, which is the Triforces has their monitoring mechanisms. So we are in a decent system. I don't think I can call it rated like 1 to 10 where it will fall. But definitely we are on a decent platform and we are working towards bettering it, which is that digitization is obviously getting in and the systems are getting, on a security angle, it's getting better.
My question is to Mr. Indika. It is regarding the previous presentation we just saw that there is a threat.
Yep.
The army.lk is there on the dark web. So what would be your response in that?
See, I mean, obviously, like, there are many of, like, government websites as well as the corporate sites are there. So now, which is we need to use these tools and make sure the protection is being done. As I said, like, with the national security, which is the Triforces and the police has their own capabilities, and from a private sector and the government point of view, which is the Sri Lanka cert is there. So we have actually enabled, or mechanism is there, and the law is getting strengthened on those areas. So that is where we are getting into, which is all the tools will be available, and we need to use the technology and using the tools and extract it, as well as when you find these things are happening, we need to bring them to in front of the law as well, which is the policies and the legal framework need to get strengthened. So which is, we are very much in place, and certain things, the gaps we have, actually we are in the flow of correcting them and fixing it to the, getting up to the speed.
I think in April we saw from the physical world, the intelligence, the machine failed in so to speak. On the cyber world, from a Sri Lankan national point of view, do we have considered the coordinated effort as a national SOC, which could also integrate to the enterprises as well? Is there an initiative to look at a national level agenda from a cyber resilience point of view? Amongst the agencies, amongst the forces, the government, the private sector, is there anyone who's spearheading that kind of an initiative?
Thanks, thank you. Good question. Yes, what Sri Lanka needs is a proper institutional framework to manage cyber security. And the new cyber security bill that is presently has been approved by Parliament, which was based on a national cybersecurity strategy that was adopted by Cabinet in October last year. That has an institutional framework that actually enables all stakeholders to play a role. So Sri Lanka's cert is not be all and end all of security in this country. That's what we're trying to get at with this institutional framework. There has to be a proper institutional framework that actually manages all of that. But one thing we have to remember is that national intelligence, national threat intelligence, or national security is not. It has to be right up there compared to security of the infrastructure of the country as a whole. I mean, the private sector and even the public sector, because threat to national security comes from a different domain. You're talking about cyber warfare. So it's not easy to merge the two, because what needs to happen is for the National Security Council to actually engage with the other security institutions to ensure that there is sufficient transparency and sufficient transportability of information, threat intelligence, to the national security level. So I think that there has to be a definite distinction there. To answer your question about a national SOC, yes, that's part of the institutional framework that is incorporated into the new cybersecurity bill that we are in the process of enacting, and that will cover mainly commercial establishments, critical infrastructure establishments of this country, like the electricity supply, the critical infrastructure, the water supply, other essential services like immigration, customs. We're talking about a national SOC to cover all that, and that process is underway. The implementation is in the process.
Just to add a few, when we had the terrorist problem when the Tamil Tigers were operating, on the 5th of July 1997, exactly 10 years after the first human suicide bomb launched by the Tamil Tigers, they launched what were called a cyber suicide attack by internet black tigers. Your namesake, they came as Colonel Ramesh, and they electronically bombed 13 Sri Lankan missions out of sight by clogging in ranging from 703 to 1,230 mails from London, our Sri Lankan High Commission in London, Jakarta, Seoul, Washington DC, Bangkok, and so forth. So it was that precipitated the US government. At that time, they didn't want to take it as a cyber terrorist attack. They launched a cyber crime bill. At that time, the US president was Bill Clinton. In fact, if you see the annual global terrorism report, which had been published by the US Department of State on the 30th of April 1998, they identified this attack as the first terror attack against, cyber terror attack against state institutions. So from 1997 onwards, Sri Lanka had faced it, and the national cyber security policy and the national security policy, everything is under stake, and all stakeholders coming under the criminal justice system, linked up with the Registration of Persons Department, the Commission of Motor Traffic or Registration of Motor Vehicles, the Sri Lanka Police, the Immigration, and all are to be linked up. A good example as to why, like in terms of airline ticketing, the hotel industry has been linked up is on the 20th of April 2019, that's the day before the fateful day of the Easter Sunday tragedy. 3 of the hotels, the Kingsbury Hotel, the Shangri-La Hotel, the Taj Hotel, the 4 suicide bombers who came in, of course Taj, he moved out, they all checked in with the same national ID card. The only genuine ID card which was logged in or checked in was here at the Cinnamon Grand at room number 425. And so if there was a system where all these hotels were linked up on a common platform, on the 20th itself, there would have been a warning sign, early warning sign, that 4 guys have checked in with the same identity card. And getting back to the question of, there were 2 instances of what we know as click fraud farm. In the post Easter Sunday attacks, where we did some investigations on, in Negombo, we identified a house which had been rented out by foreign nationals with the complicity of some Sri Lankans as well, where there were over 4,100 SIM cards. There were over 1,200 iPhones all linked up, and they were doing VoIP as well as click fraud in order to influence internet marketing. Then that was on the 16th of June 2019, that's here. Then thereafter, on the 30th of June 2019, in Kaduela, there were another 2 foreigners married, of course, to Sri Lankan nationals, where we located about another 910 iPhones all. So we see there are a lot of click fraud farms which are being operated in Sri Lanka, which influence online marketing, online, various things on the corporate sector, which the corporate sector will have to take serious cognizance of fact. That's why, as I started my comments, I said there are 2 sets of organizations, or corporate or otherwise, who knows they have been hacked, and those who doesn't know that they are hacked. Thank you.
Just wanted to ask one question while officer was just explaining some of his experiences. Does Sri Lanka's Department of Telecommunication or Ministry of Interior has a policy for lawful interception in place, which is applicable on all the telecom operators, all the ISPs which are operating in Sri Lanka, for example? Is there any regulation in place? No, I mean, we call it generally lawful interception, which means a mandate requirement from the government for all these telecom operators to keep systems of monitoring in place, which will be used by law enforcement agencies on target basis. I mean, we are all talking about the tactical ways of controlling. Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking that, such sort of things are in plan, because there are so many technocrats here. Maybe if needed, people can support. That's why this question.
There is a regulatory authority called the TRC, the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, which is governed by regulation, which is the government regulated authority in allocating frequencies to electronic mediums, radio channels, as well as television monitoring stations and so forth. So they are the regulatory commission who monitors the spectrum, even to the police, even to the military. The spectrum of frequencies are allocated by them, even to the police as well. So there is no law in Sri Lanka where interception of any sort is lawfully permitted. Unlike in other countries where you have the NSA, you have the GCHQ Act, which are all governed by regulation. But in Sri Lanka, there is no regulation and on interceptions. Only the TRC will regulate such spectrum of electronic agencies.
It's actually 2 questions, one for Ashraf and one for TT. So my first question was on the Ashraf's presentation. He has mentioned that out of the investigations on the malware incidents on the SOC, so the missed part is the one who's gaining the problems for the institution. So how do you define what is false positive and what is a true alert? So what is it? It's a thin line, actually, if you are doing the malware analysis or as an analysis. So it's a very thin line. So how do you define that? So is this a false positive or a true one? And my second question will be for TT. So when you're talking about the dark web, so I would like to ask, when it comes to Telegram kind of apps, so nowadays you don't need to go for directly on Tor or any other web browser. So dark web can be on your Telegram, the chat rooms. The dark web chat rooms can be accessed through the Telegrams because on the Telegram you have a lot of communication going on. So on the tool that you have expressed on raw dark, so did it captures Telegram these kind of communications? Because all the credit card information as well as any kind of dark web informations that the trades like you see on the Silk Route, same like. So that can be found on Telegram. So are you investigating these kind of things on your tool also?
Let me take that first, yeah. So any security solution that you see, right, when you see observations, you always see a rating out there, whether it's confidentiality or threat score, confidence score or threat score. So that kind of helps you to rate an alert, whether you want to take the decision, towards left or right. When, just to give you an example, if you are having an unknown file and you're pushing it for sandboxing, right? Some solution where it detonates to actually simulate an environment for the malware to show up, right? You're only giving 10 to 15 minutes for the malware to show up, right? And in that process, you have certain things called IOCs that gets mapped. Hey, this is what the file did during the detonation process. And in the whole process of sandboxing or detonation, you get to match the IOCs and come up with a score that tells you if you are close to the score of 10, you can verdict that, hey, there is a malware in action there, right? So, whereas if it comes to, say, 5 or 6, then you have a benefit of doubt there. So you can, based on the sensitivity of the information that you're dealing with or the environment that you're in, you can decide to move the bar, right? So that's pretty much what happens when you deal with analytics, when it comes out with observations. This is what I mean by saying that when you apply security analytics tools, you will have ratings, and you can, when you want to automate, you can say that scores beyond 8, I'm going to take an action immediately. Scores from 5 to 6, I'm going to apply an analyst to do further investigation. So that's how you can practically, there's no binary yes or no, when you do observations in security.
So I'll put it this way, right? Because like Redact as a tool, right? One of the most critical features, okay, on Redact is curated sources, okay? Because the tool is not, let's say, static. It's actually a living product. It changes every day because the databases changes every day. And like you say, it could be certain sources, like people are using, telegrams, okay, to exchange some information. And if there are ways to harvest it, okay, then that would be included as a curated source, as long as the curator feels that, hey, this is becoming a significant source of information, okay, that are relevant to the organizations, okay, like financial organizations and banks, because credit cards information that are being sold through these channels. If there's a way to harvest it, you go into a database. So the database grows on a daily basis. It is not static, because tomorrow there could be new ways that people are doing things. As long as there's a way to harvest it, okay, it is something that will be add on to the databases, right? Just to add a point, right, in terms of sources, very often the people that uses our tools, for example, government agency especially, many of these agencies, they don't just depend on, obviously, Redact as a tool, okay? They have their own network of, analysts that goes into dark web to crawl information. So the question is always, have you covered the entire dark web or entire intelligence sources possible to make sure that you're totally secure, which obviously is not, because in the world of intelligence, there's no such thing as enough intelligence. So people do use dark web as a complement to add additional sources. So the same logic applies, okay? The sources, the curated sources on the tools grows. And sometimes, because a lot of dark web sources, they are transient, the credibility of a particular dark web source could fall, okay, in terms of credibility over time, and people stop using it, and that would drop off on the list. Which is why the curation is important, right? The tools is living, it's not static.
Lal, I would like to ask this question, post it to you. We all know the SLCert is not a law enforcement agency. And we also know that you all do a lot of forensic investigations. So under which authority do you all do these forensic investigations? Number one. Number two, there is an end result of the investigations that you do. So how do you are there any challenges rather, working with these law enforcement agencies, bringing the culprit into courts or charging him?
Yeah, let me start by saying Sri Lanka CERT is obviously not a law enforcement agency. We're a national agency, no question of that. A CERT network around the world, and none of the national CERTs get involved so much in forensics investigations. But 13 years ago, when Sri Lanka CERT was first established, we realized that we didn't have any forensics capability in the country, digital forensics capability in the country. So we built our capability based on requirement at that time. We now have a very sophisticated team. We have all the latest tools, all the latest, we have an excellent forensics lab. But what we have done also is to ensure that the Sri Lanka Police Cybercrimes Division has equally good or better equipped laboratories and training. So right now, majority of the forensics investigations are being carried out by the Police Cybercrimes Division, and they're doing an excellent job. They're also helped by the Government Analyst Department, who also have a very good forensics team, but they're still new to it and they're being trained. But a lot of these forensics investigations are being carried out by the Police Cybercrime Division. Now, they have a state-of-the-art lab and they do a lot of that work. But what does happen is that Sri Lanka CERT, and to answer your question on which authority, for example, the Payment Devices and Frauds Act, under the Payment Devices and Frauds Act, Sri Lanka CERT is on the expert panel. So depending on the judge who takes the case, they could ask either the Sri Lanka Police or one of the panel members to investigate that particular fraud. So then we get involved. And there are instances where the police needs our help, and they do come to us and we do a lot of that investigation too. There's a tremendous amount of cooperation and coordination that happens. On the challenges side, to answer that question again, one of the biggest challenges we have is scene of crime officers not being trained to gather electronic evidence in a secure manner. That is something that we are addressing. We have a very close collaboration with the Police Academy, and we work with them very closely. We've built some fantastic programs and courses, but it's not easy to cover every single policeman in the country. So there is a move to ensure that every police station has an officer who can take a cybercrime report, but that hasn't quite materialized as yet, but I think eventually it will happen. So I feel the challenge there is that is the biggest challenge. On the legal side, they've done some excellent training. Jayantha has been doing some excellent work, giving a lot of knowledge and expertise from all over the world to our judges at the Judges Training Institute, and we run a regular training program there. So we're getting a fair amount of cooperation there, but there are lots of delays too in terms of prosecution in cybercrime cases. But that's expected because it's a new field for most of the lawyers.
Getting back to the statutory thing, of course, we know that the UK, United Kingdom, in 1981, they launched what was called the Forgery and Counterfeiting Act, where we brought in the computer thing. Then after the US, in 1986, they enacted the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986. Then the UK went a step further to bring the Computer Misuse Act in 1990. Then, of course, followed by 1998, the United Kingdom brought in the Data Protection Act. And then India our neighbor brought in the Information Technology Act in 2000, and the US, in the aftermath of 9/11, as we know, brought in the Homeland Security Act where they incorporated. Sri Lanka, in the first instance where computers, where the focus was under the Intellectual Property Act number 36 of 2003, that was in 2003. Followed by, in 2005, Sri Lanka enacted what was called the Payment and Settlement System Act number 28 of 2005, followed by the Electronic Transaction Act number 19 of 2006. Then, based on those experience and investigations, Sri Lanka enacted another enactment called the Payment Devices Fraud Act number 30 of 2006, and then in 2007, Sri Lanka enacted the Computer Crime Act number 24 of 2007. Of course, all these are statutory laws, means which are offenses, but procedural laws have been enacted in the Criminal Procedure Code Act number 35 of 1979. So there are laws in order to deal with it. The Criminal Investigation Department under the KOICA project, that's the government of South Korea, they trained CID officers, and we have a state-of-the-art forensic digital lab which is under the direct purview of the Criminal Investigation Department, the Cybercrime Unit. So anyone who wants to make a complaint concerning cyberbullying or anything to do with computers can log on to www.police.lk and they can receive it. Then there is a CCU or Cybercrime Unit. They directly, and your complaint will be acknowledged within 12 hours. Then you'll get a feedback within 48 hours, and then thereafter follow-up action will be taking place. So in Sri Lanka, there is US encased 4 qualified officers, of which 3 are from the CID and 1 is from the CERT, and who are internationally acclaimed, who can give expert evidence concerning cybercrime. And in fact, Celebrite, I think most of the software, I think sponsors is Celebrite. The CID has the state-of-the-art software, which in case of, as tools for digital forensic investigations. Thank you.
I would like to pose one more question to DIJ. Now, we see, we must also give the credit to Sri Lankan police. They are very good in finding once crime has been done and who did it and how and where. So probably you'll be using most of the tools and technology in terms of finding it. My question to you is that, are we using those tools that you already have, or tools you are looking only for forensic investigations? Or isn't it better that you use the same tool or invest on tools for intelligence, preventing an incident taking place, than trying to find out what happened afterwards?
In post 9/11, 2001, when the 9/11 Commission report has already told that when the Homeland Security Department was claimed, they knew that where they failed was that they relied more than 75% on TechInt or SIGINT. They didn't have HUMINT to substantiate or interpret the findings or what these tools specified. In that backdrop, OSI, open source intelligence, came into the focus, and Sri Lanka, when we saw there were a lot of child abuse cases or pedophiles who were coming in, especially in the backdrop of the post-conflict situation in Sri Lanka after the 19th of May 2009, Sri Lanka Women and Children Bureau, we did something called the social media-based law enforcement, where we put up guides, we created fake accounts of children just on the this thing, and through that we have been able to track down child pedophiles, local and foreign as a result of which. So there is something called social media-based law enforcement, which has been initially in 2009 was totally focused on identifying child molesters or pedophiles, and thereafter we have graduated and to track the transnational organized crimes as well as terrorism as well. So in that backdrop, we are very quick to track down a lot of terrorists in the backdrop of the tragic 21/4 Sunday attacks. So from a reactive perspective, we have been performing very well, and so social media-based law enforcement is being focused on a high priority basis.
So let me thank the eminent panel here, being here in their busy schedule, accepting our invitation. So let us give a good round of applause for all of them. And thank you very much for being here patiently. I would say this is the last panel and not the end of the summit. Thank you.